Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through complex information from various sources and, well, make sense of it all.
Giving you those key nuggets of knowledge.
Exactly. And today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, looking at some pretty surprising connections. We're linking the Free Britney movement, which everyone followed, to these huge societal issues, homelessness and the mental health crisis here in the U.S.
Yeah, sounds like a bit of a jump at first, doesn't it?
It really does. You might be wondering, Britney Spears, homelessness, mental health, how do they even connect? But that's what we're here to figure out. We've got a stack of sources, articles, YouTube transcripts, quite a mix. Our mission is to pull out the threads, see how they tie together, and help you understand what's really going on.
And we should say up front, the material is, well, it's complex. The sources we've looked at offer really different viewpoints. Sometimes they directly contradict each other, actually. They have starkly different takes on what happened, why it matters, and, what we should do next. So our deep dive today is about pulling out those crucial insights so you can get a grip on the whole picture.
Right. Let's dive in then. So most of us remember the Free Britney movement, right? Huge public support, massive celebration when her conservatorship ended. That's the legal thing where someone else controls your decisions. It really felt like this big win for personal freedom.
Real cultural moment.
Definitely. But here's the twist. One of our sources puts forward this really strong counter narrative, basically saying the whole Free Britney thing was, quote, a mistake.
Wow. Yeah.
How could something that seems so right be framed as, well, fundamentally wrong?
It's a really provocative claim. And the core argument from that source is essentially that even now, 4 years after the conservatorship ended, Britney Spears is, in their words, still not well. And they point to specific things. Public examples.
Like what?
Well, things like bizarre Instagram posts. There was one claiming she adopted a baby girl, but it seems she was talking about dolls. Multiple wellness checks by authorities, including one after she posted videos of herself dancing with knives.
Right, I remember that.
And then incidents like fires in her home, apparently her gym, her bathroom, even a fireplace explosion that reportedly burned her hair and eyebrows.
Yeah.
So the insight here is really challenging that idea that just ending the legal protection automatically equals stability or wellness.
And what I found really striking reading this is that it's not just an abstract argument for the person presenting it. The source host actually shares her own very personal story about her brother. Yeah, he struggles with severe mental health issues, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he's currently in a guardianship himself. She says that experience completely changed how she Britney.
That personal angle, it definitely shapes the argument that these things, conservatorships, guardianships, they aren't automatically abusive.
Yeah.
This source argues they can actually be life-saving or protective, especially if someone's a danger to themselves or others. And it's stressed that they're actually quite hard to get legally. You need solid proof for a court.
Right. It's not just granted easily.
Exactly. So the idea is, the system can be abused, but the intent is often about protecting vulnerable people. It's a different way to frame it.
And to kind of build on that point, the source brings up something interesting from Britney's own book.
Oh, yeah.
She apparently wrote about almost driving her car off a cliff, pulling a 360 turn, and feeling so alive right after. And the source uses this to suggest a worrying lack of judgment, especially when you contrast it with her testimony, where she just said she wanted the freedom to drive her car.
That's quite a contrast. And what's really insightful, or maybe challenging about that point, is this idea that maybe freedom as we normally think of it isn't always the answer for everyone. This incident, as presented, sort of forces you to think about whether protective measures, even if they seem restrictive, might sometimes be necessary when severe mental illness is involved.
It moves beyond just freedom good, control bad.
Right. It suggests that real safety, for some people, might need more than just being free from those formal structures.
It's definitely a powerful, maybe unsettling take on her story. But okay, let's make the connection. How does a pop star's conservatorship fight link to the huge visible problems of homelessness and mental health on our...
Well, the sources draw a surprisingly direct line. The argument put forward in one source is basically that the Free Britney outcome should be seen as a kind of lesson for how America is handling its homelessness crisis.
A lesson? How so?
Because, according to this view, the homelessness crisis is fundamentally an addiction and mental health crisis at its core. It suggests we're maybe looking at the wrong problem, or at least not the whole problem.
And the numbers mentioned are pretty stark, aren't they?
They really are. There's a 2024 study cited saying 2/3 of unhoused people have mental health disorders.
2/3? Wow.
And another from 2021 estimated the average rate of any current mental disorder among homeless people at 76%.
76%. That's incredibly high. And the sources paint a picture of what that looks like on the streets, right? Very vivid examples.
Heartbreaking ones, yeah. Like a man seen punching his own face until his knuckles bled, or instances of public nudity that seem linked to mental distress.
and journalists trying to help but being refused.
Exactly. Which leads right into this critique of what were currently government programs, nonprofit. The claim in the sources is that just vast amounts of money. California apparently spent $24 billion since 2019, billions poured into housing initiative. But the situation on the streets looks largely unchanged.
So where's the disconnect?
Well, the sources suggest some people actually refuse housing or shelters. Maybe they prefer being homeless, possibly because of state money or stipends they get. Or maybe they're just not willing to get clean from drugs or stick to medication plans, which shelters often require.
There's that anecdote about the woman with housing who still slept outside.
Right, because that's all she knows.
Yeah.
It really suggests housing alone isn't a silver bullet for everyone. The underlying issues are deeper.
So it sounds like what we have now are mostly just Band-Aid solutions, according to sources. They talk about things like involuntary 5150 holds, that's temporary psychiatric hospital, but they only last days or weeks.
Or jail time?
Or jail time, yeah. And then after that, often people are just released straight back to the streets. There's no transition, no real supports in place.
And if you think, okay, what about private care for severe mental illness? The sources point out huge barriers there, too. First, it's incredibly expensive. We're talking upwards of $20,000 a month. And maybe more importantly, it often still requires the person to have some motivation or drive to get better. But the nature of severe mental illness means many people just don't have that drive. They might even be, in their own way, more comfortable or functional in their current street situation. It becomes this cycle.
Okay, so given that really difficult picture, one source puts forward a very controversial idea.
Let me guess. Institution.
Exactly. The reopening of American institutions for the severely mentally ill, which understandably rings alarm bells for a lot of people because of history.
It's definitely a charged topic. But the source is apparently very clear. This is not about going back to the disgusting abuse of hospitals in the past. The proposal is for an updated, safe infrastructure. A modern system designed to actually house and help these individuals long term.
And the argument ties into the money again.
Yeah, the idea is that tax dollars would be better spent on something like this, structured long-term care, rather than, say, on nonprofits with maybe little oversight or on temporary shelters people won't even use. The insight being offered is kind of like, let's not let the trauma of past failures stop us from considering a reimagined version if it could genuinely help those who need it.
And there's a public safety argument folded in.
Right. The source argues that when someone's actions violate the law or put law-abiding innocent civilians in harm's way, well, their own rights have effectively already been violated by their condition or act.
Implying that more decisive action is needed than just temporary societal duty.
But this is where you get the really sharp pushback described in the sources, especially from groups like the ACLU.
What's
their position is pretty firm. Institutions, by their nature, strip people of their rights, and they believe fundamentally that forced treatment does not work. Full stop.
So what's their alternative?
They strongly advocate for voluntary housing and community-based support. Their spokesperson is quoted saying, "Institutions are dangerous and deadly." It's a view that prioritizes autonomy and choice above all else.
Now, here's a fascinating historical point one source makes against the ACLU. It suggests that lawsuits they pursued back in the 1980s, lawsuits against police arresting people for camping or clearing encampment, actually contributed to the rise of visible street homelessness.
Ah, the idea of unintended consequences.
Precisely. The source argues this became much more obvious after the big mental institutions were mostly closed down in the late 60s and early 70s.
And they use specific examples to try and back this up, right? Cases from history.
They do. The sources mention a few quite stark ones. There's Billy Boggs, described as a mad New York City person. He won legal battles, celebrated at Harvard Law, but apparently returned to a street life of squalor, defecating on public sidewalks. Then Larry Hogg, called a homeless crack addict known for violent crimes, repeatedly released from psychiatric hospital. And Yetta M. Adams, a schizophrenic woman who tragically died right across from the HUD offices after apparently refusing help from social services
These cases are definitely presented as evidence for the limits of just letting people be free when they're severely ill, suggesting that maybe intervention, even if forced, could have been more compassionate in the long run.
It's a tough argument. And it's interesting how one source wraps this up by mentioning former President.
What about Reagan?
Well, he was criticized at the time for suggesting homelessness was linked to mental illness, using that life. But this source claims that later data actually vindicated.
It really shows how these debates cycle back around, doesn't it? The same core questions keep coming up.
Absolute. But as you'd expect, that's not the only perspective in our source. Let's pivot now. Let's look at the arguments that strongly defend releasing Britney, saying it absolutely was the right thing.
Right, because there's a whole different way to frame this. These other sources talk about the conservatorship as a golden prison. They argue passionately that Britney endured severe mental and emotional abuse while she was under it, and their stance is firm. No one deserves to live such a life.
So from this angle, her release wasn't a mistake at all.
Not at all. It was an essential escape from what they describe as an abusive situation. The core insight here is completely different. The biggest harm wasn't the risk of her not coping on her own, but the actual experience of being controlled, even if it was meant as protection.
And one source makes a pretty pointed comparison, doesn't it? Targeting the advocate for institution.
It does, yeah. It suggests she should understand Britney's situation better by looking at her own family history, mentioned in the source involving a father who allegedly wanted to abort her mother and was a toxic spouse.
The implication being
that maybe personal experience with difficult family stuff should create more empathy for what Britney went through, rather than leading to calls for more control.
It's quite personal.
Very. And this perspective argues strongly that Britney's current state, she seems unhealthy mentally or emotionally, is a direct result of that past abuse under the conservatorship.
So the solution isn't more control.
Exactly. These sources argue what she really needs now is a break from everything and mental and emotional support, not being put back into any kind of confinement. The idea is her freedom was necessary, even if it's messy now. Her struggles today are seen as symptoms of the trauma she endured, not proof she can't handle freedom. It completely reframes the narrative.
And there was even a bit of skepticism raised about the expertise of the institution's advocate based on her age.
Yeah, one source points out she was born like 2 years after Britney's first album dropped. It questions whether someone that much younger has the lived context to really get the nuances of Britney's whole career and the pressures she faced. A bit of an ad hominem perhaps, but it's in the mix. So when you put all these viewpoints together, you really see this deep tension, don't you? Protection versus freedom. For some, that golden prison was the real damage. So getting out was paramount, whatever came next. It's a fundamental clash over what help even mean for someone who's been through intense trauma and control.
Which brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've definitely unpacked a lot of complexity, that delicate balance between individual liberty and, well, societal, and the huge challenge of actually providing effective care for people with severe mental illness. Clearly no easy answers here.
No, not at all. What the sources really highlight is the societal struggle, right? We're trying to find an approach that's both compassionate and actually functional. And there's just this deep divide revealed in how we even define things like help, freedom, and responsibility. It shapes the whole debate about supporting vulnerable people while keeping the wider community safe.
So as you think about everything, Beck, we want a final thought. Considering in a society that values what is our true how do we protect everyone involved outside